Our session is going to be about leadership development and event design. Don't have to be built only for the loudest voices in the room. This session challenges how we gather, how we design experiences that support all minds, including introverted and neurodivergent professionals. Please welcome Juliette Paige, co-founder and director of the experience at the Slowdown Summit. And joining her is Zach Reizes, founder of the Slowdown Summit. Juliette and Zach, welcome on stage.
We're in. We did it.
Okay.
Good. Are we in? Sweet. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. I'm Juliette Paige, joined by my co-founder, Zach Reizes, here to explain the origin story for our thesis. Designing for accessibility and inclusion is not a burden. In fact, we know that accessible choices level the playing field for the majority of event attendees. To kick us off, I'm going to hand the proverbial mic to Zach.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you for handing me that microphone, Juliette. This is an enormous microphone, so I'm not going to speak into it the whole time, but we'll pass the proverbial mic back and forth, I'm sure. And, really, we're going to be talking to the audience here, and we would really like you all to chime in. I want to start by asking you this question. The question is, if you were to picture the most typical event, like the most typical event you could picture, what would you be envisioning? And I'm going to make some guesses, but we are going to get into the chat in a moment here. I'm going to guess that you're picturing boring activations, hard plastic seats, and then that moment where like a stuffy panel ends and everyone claps and then you funnel out into the atrium to trade in your drink ticket for a domestic beer. This question that Juliette and I are asking is, why is this the norm for events? Why is it that image I just described is so common? Juliette,
Events are typically structured. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you, Zach. Events are typically structured the exact same way. There's the speech, there's applause, there's freeform networking. And for some events, that totally makes sense. But for so many others, this basic formula is not just lazy event design, it's actually biased event design that sacrifices event comfort, experiences, and outcomes for the majority. So stated differently, we believe this: that so-called average event is not design neutral. It's a design that is biased toward extroverts, auditory learners, and neurotypical people.
So what Juliette just outlined is the thesis that underscores our thought experiment, which is turning into a real-life event called the Slowdown Summit. And it's this idea that the vast majority of conferences, events, parties, happy hours, etc., disadvantage the introverted, creative, and neurodivergent professionals who are some of our favorite people and also some of the most critical leaders in our lives and the companies that we work for and for event professionals serve. And this disadvantage, it's baked in ways that we don't even think of, right? So like every component of a typical conference is designed to advantage the brain that is extroverted, comfortable in high stimulation environments, who's a strong auditory learner and is socially energized by unstructured networking. And, our perspective is just like, really, who can say that all of that is true about them?
So we're here to challenge inclusivity in event design space with a focus on neuro-inclusivity. This ensures that we are building events for all types of learners and leaders. So this is when we get to the fun question. So this is a question for all of you to get in the chat. Please, please, please chime in. Imagine if an alien was beamed down into Earth and we told this alien to put on an event. What question would this alien ask first? So get into the chat. Let's see what
it's
we
a
got.
little bit of like a nuanced question, right? But if you're an alien and we say put on an event, like what are you asking in order to understand the context? Okay, Rebecca, you said why? Excellent, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in? What's an event? Excellent.
So true, so true. I like that. Well, what kind of event? That's also great. What else are we asking?
So, who's it for? Amazing.
Right.
Okay.
Where am I? So true.
Time, yeah.
Right.
Let's keep going.
So our guess is that for any aliens seriously dedicated to their homework like you are, the first question they'd ask is why? Like, what are the goals of this event?
Yeah, I think why was the question that we came up with as well, because once we are aligned on like the goals, then we can get rid of designing around our preconceived notions about what a gathering should look like. And we can move on to, really getting into the heart of what we're trying to accomplish. And so here's our second question. If you were designing an event from scratch and you were to scrap your preconceived notions of what an event should look like or feel like, what would you keep rather, and what would you get rid of immediately? This is like, what do you hate? What do you love in events? This is an open question for all of you again. Cash bars need to go. Awesome.
Cash bars. Yeah, great answer.
Longer break times. Love.
Snaps.
Okay, so we're gonna we want you to keep reflecting on this question. Panels, happy hours, keynotes, unstructured networking. There's all of these elements to sort of a classic run-of-the-mill event. And what we believe is that a lot of what we default to doesn't actually map to the stated goals of events.
So this leads us to our core thesis behind the Slowdown Summit. Events should be designed around audience profiles, not averages, not the average extrovert, not the loudest learner in the room, but how the full range of how humans learn, process, connect, and regulate their nervous systems.
And I can see that like a lot of folks in the chat, and I wish I could actually be in the room with you, but I see that a lot of you get this automatically, right? So everything Juliette and I are building comes from really two goals. And the first goal is specific to the Slowdown Summit, this event we're putting on, which is to redefine leadership to include quiet and introspective brilliance and genius. And then goal two is to redefine how we gather by using inclusivity as a design principle, not an accommodation. We really believe that this isn't about creating a niche event for a niche audience. It's about designing for the majority that has been quietly excluded. And then what we want to do is show what's possible once we do that well.
So the first question we always get is, what does that actually look like? So let's start with the physical space, because the environment sends a message before a single speaker even opens their mouth. So number one, we're building in high and low stimulation zones, because some people do their best connecting in the energy of this buzzing room, and others need quiet to process and recharge. Both are completely valid, and both are so welcome and encouraged here. Number two, we're adding structure into networking. Open networking may sound inclusive, but for a lot of people, it's actually one of the most exclusionary formats that we use. Unstructured networking relies on luck, hoping to bump into the right person and ask the right question, all while getting intoxicated off Bud Lights. So we're changing that by creating spaces that signal that you already have something in common with the person next to you. We're creating activations that you can engage with by yourself or with someone else. And we're shifting the conversation from small talk and what do you do to what brings you here. And number three, we're setting expectations far in advance, telling attendees how the space works, what to expect, and how to engage with it. Because when people know what they're walking into, that's when they can actually bring their best self.
And then Juliette's focused on the experience. I'm focused on curation for our summit. So how this shows up in the content that we're creating. Well, one of the things we know is that people don't learn in the same ways. So we're labeling all of our sessions by learning modality, kinesthetic, visual, or auditory, and then publishing that information in our schedule before the event so that our attendees can build a day that fits how their brain actually works. We're also building these processing pathways between sessions. We didn't have a name for it. I just made that up when we were working on this talk. But concretely, what that means is that there is a guided reflection prompt tied to each session to help people process the information and integrate what they just heard. And then specific to our schedule, most conferences are built around the idea of scarcity. So you've packed in as many sessions as possible to fill every hour. we're really doing the opposite. We want to build in intentional white space. And I really want to emphasize not dead time, but white space to allow that information integration to happen.
We're also challenging the way that expertise is even presented. So the traditional model puts one person on a stage and everyone's in rows facing them. It's more of a broadcasting model dressed up as an educational one. But we're asking, like, what if the most valuable insight in the room isn't the one on stage? What if the format itself is suppressing it? So we're rethinking hierarchy in the room, creating sessions where the line is blurred between the presenter and the participant, and where attendees are treated as contributors rather than just consumers.
Okay, so this is a real thing, Evan. I saw that you asked that. We'll get to that right at the end with 4 minutes to go. What we were asked to share is what we're building, but we wanted to also, lead with or sort of end with how these principles scale to all kinds of events, small, medium, and large. And so here are a few of our target action items. The first is what I referenced before. For any agenda, you've got your column that has the traditional session title, session time, maybe session description. We really recommend and suggest adding a second column, just one line that says what kind of participation is expected and what should someone leave knowing. That takes maybe 20 extra minutes to write. It doesn't cost anything else. And it'll cut anxiety for everyone who processes better when they have advanced context, which is really most people. And then we also want to suggest that you can end every meeting or session with 60 seconds of written reflection or a written material before having a verbal debrief. And that really levels the playing field between people who think out loud and people who think before they speak. And that creates a richer conversation.
All right, we've got 2.5 minutes, but the other thing we want to say is about thinking about your attendee profiles, plural. Who's actually in the room? Not the loudest person and not the default assumption. Who are the quiet contributors? Who processes verbally and who needs time alone to form an opinion worth sharing? Who might be opting out to the experience due to preconceived notions of the event? The goal is to build an on-ramp for all. The bigger takeaway is this: we're all in the events industry. Inclusivity at the moment is currently treated as an afterthought in event design, which means it's the first thing that gets nixed during budget cuts. Or maybe a little bit better, inclusivity is seen as a pillar, which still requires the audience to ask for it in the form of an accommodation. In reality, designing for inclusivity does not require a massive budget or a complete reinvention. It requires intention from the beginning and asking alien questions, the ones that almost feel too basic to ask, but be willing to sit with the answers before you default to what you've that you always do. So when you design with the full range of your audience in mind, you don't just serve the people who've been overlooked, you build something better truly for everyone.
Okay, so we're reaching the end of our time here. We're really excited about this. I promised to share some information. So what we just described is what we're building at the Slowdown Summit, which is a leadership development conference designed with introverted and neurodivergent leaders in mind first. That doesn't mean it's just for introverted and neurodivergent leaders. It just means we're taking design principles that serve those kinds of leaders before we're serving our extroverts or auditory learners. And then in the spirit of providing for many ways to learn, I'm going to drop a resource in the chat in just a moment that just summarizes everything we've talked about here. It's titled Questions to Ask Before Attendees Walk into the Room. So 50 seconds to go. Juliette and I are around. Please find the Slowdown Summit online and find us on LinkedIn. And then, take this next 40 seconds to slow down yourself. Take a pause, lean back, deep breath. Thank you all so much for being with us as we sort of ran through this.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you both, Zach and Juliette. That was a wonderful session, and honestly bringing up some ideas that are easily overlooked. So I appreciate you vocalizing that.